Hi, everybody. My name is Evan Thomas. I'm in the product management organization for buyer experience at eBay. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you today about an important topic to me and is near and dear to my heart, but the practice of product management at home. So really quickly, first, just about me, I'm in kind of a unique role at eBay, what we kind of colloquially call a product COO, which is essentially somebody at the intersection of our product vice president, our product leads, and our product managers. For the VP, I really help support that vision for that individual with regard to all of the other organizations that we work with to navigate each of those pieces for resourcing and for financial footprint and for goals. For our product leads, I really help focus on strategy to help those individuals build a really great sort of core charter area that's going to build out strategy for the whole team and deliver on the sort of customer-facing goals that each of those areas are focused on. And then for product managers, my role is really focused on helping them develop really great growth skills for estimating each of their products and features and building out sort of measurement frameworks. So essentially TLDR, my role at eBay is to effectively be the glue and to help the organization be successful. So when the organization is successful in delivering impact for customers, my role is successful at the intersection of all of these places. So today I want to talk a little bit about remote product management or product management at home, as many of us have been experiencing with COVID over the last 8, 9, 10 months. So today we're going to talk about some problems that are uniquely facing remote product management. And then I think just to cover some helpful unlocks on my end that I've found over the course of my career that have really helped me navigate through what doing remote product work looks like. These aren't, meant to be the end all be all. I'm sure there are other unlocks. I'm sure there are flavors of these that might be helpful and applicable to you, but flavors of them that might not. So I really encourage you to take a look at each of these with a grain of salt and know that these are my experiences. And I'm hopeful that some of these will help you frame your experience as well. So we're going to talk about 3 kind of core areas in strategy, execution, and leadership for remote product managers. So let's start with some of the problems that are facing PMs at home. I think the primary problem is that PMs, while they sort of represent the customer needs at large for an individual cohort or segment or area of market, they really are representing a whole bunch of other individuals across the business as well. So whether that's sort of strategic needs that might come from somebody in the strategy or business team, or regional needs, if there's a capability that's sort of unique to a certain market or a certain geography that we might not want to introduce globally, or legal needs to ensure that we're having compliance and able to meet certain laws like GDPR and privacy being a big one over the last couple of years, and certainly technology needs as well, like how are we going to scale an architecture, how are we going to make something work for longevity and for developer ease and for cost reductions in technology. So PMs inherently are at this intersection of all of these different pieces of inputs that are being given to them from all of these 5 or potentially more at your company buckets, where we have a specific need, we have a consumer opportunity, we have a pain point for consumers, we have a legal obligation, and trying to balance out all of that stuff. And I think historically for product managers, the easiest way to navigate through those needs is to get all the stakeholders in the same room and to brainstorm and to be open about prioritization and compare things apples to apples so that all of you can come to a logical and unified conclusion about what's going to be important for this area of work to focus on for the next few sprints or the next few months or the next few quarters. So that's kind of the first area of like high collaboration. And then there's another area of collaboration, which as you get into the grooming and the technical requirements, and at eBay, all of our product managers are not, we don't have a split of PM and technical PM. They're responsible for the whole funnel here. There's another kind of collaboration that's needed to get with your individual sprint team and talk about what is, what kind of databasing technology should we use? What should our schema be? What's the business logic that we need in the APIs? And those kind of architectural decisions and discussions that I think are inherently collaborative as well. And also having sort of a lack of a cohabitating the same area and whiteboarding those things out can also be hindering for a remote PM. So what I want to talk about now is sort of what are the ways that we can navigate through a system that has those inherent disadvantages where it's harder to collaborate with stakeholders and harder to collaborate with sprint teams on both sides of the coin. And what I've sort of found for myself is that it's okay to not be a visionary. And it has took me most of my 20s to figure out. I've worked for some incredible visionaries over the years who have this ability to connect dots so quickly and to think of really great ideas to fit really great markets. But I would sort of qualify all sort of product skills that are inherent to this role into two buckets. There's sort of visionary skills, and then there's what I would sort of call incubation skills. And the visionary skills are inherently advantaged by having people in the same room, by building coalition, by reaching across the aisle, and by brainstorming in mass. Whereas the incubation skills are more of the things that you can do on your own, and they're certainly collaborative, but we need to find ways to develop some things up front and then engage folks with those thoughts in a way that is open and encouraging of feedback and can help us come to a conclusion all together as a result of that. So I think about the core kind of product skills across the board in this way. So, as we're engaging with our stakeholder about what is it we want to build, we're empathizing with the kind of core need, the consumer need. We're doing market assessments to understand what is actually in this market that's going to be a winner for us to be able to move forward and develop really good capabilities for this customer. Then we start to problem solve those customer needs and evangelize those potential solutions that we've had as things that we could invest in. We estimate the impact of those solutions and we revenue model those things to make sure they're going to be financially viable for the company. We select the winners, and when we define the success of those winners for how we should look at those things in the context of the overall business and what we expect those things to move. Certainly translating those winners into product lifecycle requirements, your design briefs, your acceptance criteria, your non-functional requirements, like things like speed or security, or I guess those are functional requirements, but non-functional requirements, things like that we need to be mindful of, that the customer might be engaging, that aren't necessarily things that we have to build. And then as you continue down the line, resource allocation. How are we actually going to fund this initiative that we want to move forward? What are the teams that are going to be involved? What are the dependencies? Are we going to make a trade-off from one team into another team? And then certainly at eBay, a big part of the job for product managers is to drive the program execution and really like managing the sprints, sprint over sprint, and the retrospectives and our planning processes and things like that. And then at the bottom of the funnel of these core skills is about gauging success and then interpreting the behavioral data that is seen by the release or the initiation of a feature into future learnings for us to be able to use. So this is a broad set of skills that I sort of consider to be fundamental to the product management profession overall. So if you want to think of them in terms of what are those visionary skills versus those incubation skills, the visionary skills are really the things that require buy-in and groupthink and brainstorming in such a way that they're going to be better. They're going to be made better by the sum of all the parts. So it's impossible to assess a market without multiple brains in the room that have different perspectives on that market. It's impossible to problem solve customer needs. I don't think any product manager should think that they are solely able to problem solve a customer need. It requires design input and research input, other product manager input. Evangelizing solutions certainly is very difficult to do without an in-person audience or sort of developing coalition. Selecting winners. Again, I think this is a very collaborative process from a visionary standpoint where you want to pitch a vision and then select the winners that are going to supplement that vision. Certainly resource balancing you can't do without talking to the other teams in the same room about how are we going to make these kinds of trade-offs. It becomes much more difficult to do that from afar. Certainly program execution and engaging success, similar to selecting winners, I think you want to do as a group. There are 1,000 different ways to look at the same data and interpret it in different ways. So you want to make sure that you're all kind of aligned and ensured that you believe that these parts of the feature are successful, the whole feature is successful, et cetera, et cetera. So again, these are the things that I think are going to be harder for folks that are in remote or PM at home product management positions, where you really need to be mindful about how you're going to engage in these areas, knowing that you're sort of at an inherent disadvantage for being able to drive a lot of impact in these areas differently than product folks that are co-located or in the same room as the broader coalition. But these are the incubation skills, and these are the things that I've found over the years are the ones that I've really started to lean into as my core strengths. And I think these are the things that certainly are collaborative by nature, but they have higher affordance for you to dive deep in the area and uncover as many things as you can and try things out and see what you find, see what sticks, see what makes sense, see what's logical, and then bring that external and share that with all of the folks that are needed to get excited about a certain product or a certain vision, so that you can then collaborate on what the sort of final decision in these places are. So empathizing with customer needs, I think, is a critical piece of product management that always, unfortunately, it seems like no matter who I talk to, whether they're friends or coworkers at eBay or outside of eBay, this one feels like, given how many directions I'm pulled in right now, how do I have enough time to really deeply dive into what a consumer needs in a certain area? And for remote folks, this is a big opportunity. There are times that we can, carve out for ourselves to really deeply do guerrilla research and jump in with a consumer base in a community board, or talk to folks, go out into the world and talk to folks that are using your product around your neighborhood. Certainly estimating potential impact. This is a big part of the job that I think requires a lot of initial upfront thought to think about, hey, what sort of consumer output or consumer behavior is this feature going to drive that's going to generate impact at a company level? So sizing all of the different capabilities that you might, all the options that are available to you relative to how much they're going to, increase consumer engagement or increase consumer re-engagement or increase adoption or increase visibility or things like that. These are all things that product managers can spend more time understanding the prospective reach of their feature. Which pages are consumers going to engage on? At what point in the page are they going to engage on it? What's the likelihood of them getting through to the next step of the journey? What's the likelihood of them getting through to the final step of the journey and therefore contributing to an overall sort of input or output goal? So really spending a lot of time estimating all of this impact that's coming in from all of these different sources. Revenue modeling, I think, is this natural extension of estimating potential impact, where now we know, we think we're going to drive this certain behavior or this certain engagement a little bit more for a specific cohort or segment of consumers. Let's transfer function that into its financial impact for the company. And then from understanding what we estimate the financial impact will be for the company, kind of creating cost intervals, if you will, like scope intervals of how much upfront cost it will take to build it, how much customer service ramp will we need to add, how much operational cost will there be, is there going to be a marketing campaign, logistical costs, things of that nature. Really building out a full cost model so you can have a good conversation with your engineers of like, hey, I think if we can do this in 12 months with 7 engineers, it's going to pay for itself in X number of years, versus if we can do it in 12 months with 25 engineers, it's going to take longer. So to have that kind of revenue model in mind, and I think you'll find, depending on your company and depending on what product you're working on, different products will have different sort of thresholds for how much risk they're willing to take on from revenue modeling. How long will the break even take? Defining success, I think, is a natural extension of estimating the potential impact of a feature. That's kind of estimating where is this going to, this feature going to have impact in a broader sense, not just on an overall goal, but where is this going to affect consumer behavior overall? Are we going to pull consumer behavior from one area of the product into this product? Are we going to cannibalize it in that way? How are we going to drive incrementality? How is it going to affect the overall consumer's adoption of a different feature set? Trying to think of things more at an ecosystem level to understand the success. Certainly thinking about like, where do you not want to break the business? What are your health metrics underneath this? Things like that are part of the defining success of an individual feature, of a winning feature that's chosen. Yes, I think that remote PMs have a luxury of being able to spend more time in their product requirements, of building out really great and helpful acceptance criteria for engineering, and sort of checking all those boxes. So I think that's a big part of doing remote work as well. And then the last one is interpreting that behavioral data. So where gauging success is sort of a group effort to determine, did this feature tick all the boxes that we wanted it to tick? Should we launch it? How should we launch it? Interpreting behavioral data is saying, okay, we launched this feature. It affected 15 different things, one of which was kind of the core, or maybe a couple of which was kind of the core launch decision. But how did it affect everything else? Did it affect things in such a way where we could incorporate that learning into a second iteration of this feature? Or did it affect things in a way where we might incorporate a learning into a larger strategy, and talking to a VP or to a director about what that strategy might look like, to incorporate it into a planning cycle or a future investment cycle down the stream. So I think remote PMs also have a great opportunity to dig in deep into the data about how individual features have affected the ecosystem overall. The other kind of key area for remote product folks is about time prioritization. And I would say that time prioritization for PMs in general is super critical, but particularly for remote folks, I think it's almost as important as customer prioritization. You want to make sure that how you're spending your own individual time, given that you're at the intersection of all of these different people that have all of these different needs, you want to make sure your time is spent on the things that are going to be most important to customers. And so trying to navigate through that, and how you can make trade-offs for yourself, how you can sort of use sort of soft skills to work with folks in an emotional kind of a way, and help them understand the sort of the complexity that you're dealing with, to make sure that you're only focusing on those things that are going to drive the most impact. So I'm sure that for many of you that are product managers today, this is what your calendar on an average day looks like. This is a very common thing that I've seen from across the board. This was certainly my calendar for many, many years. And I think this is the case for both remote and non-remote product managers, where you kind of have these core little small pockets every day, 30 minutes at a time, where you're not doing strategy or a design review or an analytics review or discovery meeting as a whole. And it's really hard to do all that incubation skills that we just talked about in a 30-minute time slot. It's so hard to get started and then stop and then start and then stop on those deep thought, kind of critical thinking, creative thinking ways that you could size impact, or that you could revenue model, or that you could engage and empathize with customers. There's a lot of different modeling that has to kind of happen in order to do that, and frameworks that you need to put forward to do that. It's very hard to do it in a 30-minute by 30-minute chunk of time and have it be quality at the end of the day. So what I encourage folks to do is to examine in their remote capacity what sort of on time versus off time means, which is like blocks of time where you can sort of be on, which means like, everybody kind of has their work on, and they're kind of plugged in and engaged with stakeholders or with HQ. And then to build out a more solid chunk of time that is off time, which will give you the flexibility and ability to dive deeper in some of these incubation areas in ways where you may not have been able to if you were in a calendar that looked more like the former. So you might, in your first off time, do an estimation model for a couple of different features to be able to compare them apples to apples about how much engagement each of them that you think will be driven by each of them while listening to Spotify, right? Like the reason I say listening to Spotify is a lot of the balance of being a PM from home too is how do you sort of create work-life harmony with the rest of your life? Like I like to listen to Spotify loudly and blaringly in my house rather than in earbuds while I'm doing sort of creative market work or forecasting work or financial work or estimation work. It's just kind of the flow that I'm in and sort of embracing that sort of work-life harmony in that way. Or similarly, in your latter time, build out a plan to go talk to some customers on Reddit and dive deep with them and understand how it is they engage with your product, and then take the dogs for a walk, right? Like there's a way to sort of create that sort of work-life harmony within your off time in a way that's also going to advantage you from a burnout perspective as well as you continue to do this remote product work for the remainder of your career. Some big risks to look out for, and again, these might not be an exhaustive list, and I'd love it if you could, if you have some other risks that you've thought of or you've engaged with in your career and would like to engage in a dialogue with me, I'd love to chat with you about those too. But some of the ones that I've experienced, one, missing out on important decisions. This is just something that I think you just kind of have to come to terms with. Like there will be some meetings by clearing out those blocks of incubation time. There will be some meetings that you miss. And either having a great relationship with folks where you could have a delegate who's going to represent you in those contexts, or developing a good working system where you can have good readouts or memos or trying to bring those as much into documentation as possible is going to help you be involved with those decisions. Additionally, I think that keeping yourself productive during the off time is a key part of this too. So I try to for me, it's a bit habitual at this point, but I try to develop a plan for myself, even the week before. Like I'll sometimes block my calendar for my own time and what I want to accomplish in that time, not just blocking it for blocking its sake, but having a goal and setting out for that goal for you to do during your incubation time, during your off time, I think is super important. And then how you engage during your on windows, I think is also another risk here. One of the things that I found with being sort of a person who gets that more of that off time and is able to incubate more deeply on things is that I often will get pretty far into the weeds. I'll get pretty deep into the details about something that I'm thinking about. And then when I re-engage with headquarters and the on time, it's really important for me to know the audience that I'm talking to, so that I don't bring up all of those edge cases or granularities with somebody at an audience level that doesn't care about those things, or that I don't talk about things that are too much on the financial side with my engineers when I should be talking about things that are more on the day-to-day sort of task side and how those are going to impact customers in a certain way. So the other thing too that I found in how you engage during your limited on windows is that one of the side effects of spending so much time deeply engaging on a topic is that you develop sort of a passion for it and a depth of knowledge, sort of a subject matter expertise in that area. It's important to be really mindful when you do re-engage, to try as hard as you can not to come off too prescriptive in that area. That we're likely still wrong about, if perhaps not about everything, but about a number of things, even after we've put together a really sophisticated and well thought out, financial model or estimation model, there are still things that people can contribute and can make better in that. And so I think just by proxy of the fact that we've spent so much time deeply in it, I think it's important to come into the on time with curiosity and with continuous improvement, rather than to present everything that you've found about this area at an in-depth level, because that can come off as too prescriptive and anti-collaboration to many of your teammates. Lastly, from a leadership perspective, I think one of the biggest uphill battles with regard to working remotely is navigating sort of that teammate connection and understanding folks' motivations. And this is super hard, particularly from a Zoom to Zoom kind of capacity. But I've found in my career that some of the best ways to get things done and some of the most joyous ways to get things done at work are when there's a high amount of human connectivity between the team and when there's a high amount of understood motivation from the team. What I mean by motivation is everybody on your team is going to have different motivations, which should inform how you engage with them. Some people are going to be motivated by social connections. Some people are going to be motivated by driving a lot of impact. Some people are going to be motivated by growing their careers. And to understand what each person is motivated by is a lot easier when you have constant exposure and exposure to body language and things like that, rather than either an asynchronous or a video conference with just a window of somebody's torso. It's much more difficult to gauge and to connect with people in that way. So some thoughts that I have in this area are, it's okay to create meetings just to get to know people. I would argue that even in the off time, on time world, creating half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to just sort of talk to somebody, talk to them about your joys, about your struggles, about the things that are hard. I can't tell you how many times I've had really wonderful, meaningful conversations with folks on Zoom over the course of COVID to just unload and to just like get a load off and be sad with somebody because it's a hard time. And I can't tell you how impactful that can be, particularly for product managers in leadership positions that are remote, where fostering those connections are super important. So don't feel like you need to have some project or some motive or some reason to call a meeting. If there's somebody you don't know super well on your team, I think just getting to know them will pay dividends later on, particularly for remote product folks. If you just take the time to create that meeting on your calendar, it's some of the best time that you can spend during your on time. Second here, I think relying a little bit more on words and sort of what I would call thoughtful responses, rather than, as I said before, on body language and reactions. I think that product management overall is highly, there's a advantageous sort of nature to particularly being a visionary with regard to the person, the kind of like Steve Jobsian, Elon Muskian kind of mentality for people that can kind of think of the right thing to say quickest and are able to articulate it in a super precise and concise kind of a way. I think those people are super successful in product management roles, but not everybody's that way. I'm not a quick trigger kind of person. Like my brain doesn't operate in that way. And I think that there's an opportunity for product managers at home to embrace an inverse of that, which is to rely a little bit more on thinking about how you want to respond to something and not trying to contribute right away in a meeting, but sitting on it for a while and then maybe engaging with the person who called the meeting one-on-one rather than reconvening a full group. I found that to be a really successful way to sort of move through larger decisions that are happening. And I think relying on words is a big piece of that too. We don't have the luxury of body language here. We don't have the luxury of sitting in the same pod with 15 people and seeing them throughout the day and seeing whether or not they feel jubilant or whether or not they might feel down and seeing what the causes of that of those different emotions might be. So I found it's actually super helpful to be very explicit, which doesn't mean blunt. It just means very open with regard to asking people, hey, what are your underlying motivations? Like what are the things that that drive you to activity at work? And sometimes that takes a bit of courage. Sometimes it takes a bit of courage to be able to ask those kinds of questions rather than relying on sort of environmental factors to inform them. I don't think asking what motivates someone is particularly courageous, but for things that are harder, for things that folks might be struggling with, for things that you might be struggling with, I think it's really important to use your words in a remote role, so that you can foster and build those connections in a way that that are different than relying on sort of a group environment that sort of informs a lot of those things that we know about each other. I think developing skills and tools to help with asynchronous collaboration is super critical. Some of the best ways to understand what motivates your team or what gets your team excited is just through collaboration styles. And so there are a lot of great tools out there, workflow tools, brainstorm tools, things like that, that in the moments when you can develop a good working rhythm for how to collaborate asynchronously, I think it really pays off in the end. It allows your voice to be heard. And for folks that are potentially listening to this webinar that aren't remote and that do have some advantages of being in the room when kind of critical decisions are made, I'd ask that know that it can sometimes be hard to feel heard in a remote environment, to sort of try to bring your voice to the table when there's 8 people in a room and then you're on a Zoom call. So I'd encourage folks that are on the other side of the equation too to try to find a moment to pause and see if there might be some other additional thoughts that could be had from people that don't have the same kind of quick snap reactions that are more immediately contributing to a conversation, and to ask folks what how they want to collaborate, or what are they thinking about in the collaboration process that they can bring to the table as well. And then I can't emphasize this enough, but making the most of your work trips is absolutely critical. I think that I made a decision early on in my career that every work trip's primary outcome was going to be about building connection with people and taking advantage of experiencing the culture and the environment and the body language and how people are. And there's always a reason the work trip happens. You're gonna launch a feature, you're gonna have a training, you're gonna have an all hands meeting, whatever the case may be. But I'd encourage you to consider that the secondary reason from now until forever. And the primary reason for every work trip ever is to help you foster relationships and connection with folks in ways that you don't have the luxury of being able to do on a daily basis due to the proximity of where you work. And so your actual reason for travel becomes the same every time. And I think that's in a lot of ways kind of freeing and allows you to make sure that you're focused on a team member who you might not have as deep of a connection with, or how to engage in a team activities that can bring people closer together, even from across sort of Zoom activities. I realize we can't do that right now because of COVID, but as soon as COVID lifts and we're able to do more work trips, I'd encourage folks to consider this as well. That's my whole presentation today on some of the things that I've learned about product management from home or remote product management. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you have any additional thoughts or would like to engage in a dialogue about remote or at-home product management, I do think that the industry is going to move more and more in that direction, and I'd love to chat with you about your thoughts and the things that you're thinking about, so that you and I can really engage and with this whole concept of remote PM and how we can sort of transform the industry and help people be successful in this way. So please feel free to jet me an email at epthomas@ebay.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much for your time. And please stay safe, everybody.